Hey Seth, where are we going?
Too many games.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Classic Gaming Brothers. I'm Seth.
And I'm Zach.
And we are the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's
right. What a day.
What a dollar.
We made it all the way back from Too Many Games. Hopefully everyone enjoyed the episode that we released while we were at Too Many Games, which was about the Super Mario movie.
Nope, that episode did not come out when we were at Too Many Games. The Eternal Champions came out when we were at Too Many Games.
I hope that Andy enjoyed. We actually did. When we get the mail. We got the mail call here.
Oh yeah, we do have some mail. Seth, why don't you pull up our mail box?
He said, I'm stoked for my drive into work tomorrow. Thanks for doing Eternal Champions for me. Hope you blokes are having fun at Too Many Games. Looking forward to a post-pod for that. Oh, great. So we're doing what Andy wants us to do.
Oh, excellent. Well, I'm glad Andy is excited that we had fun at Too Many Games.
If you're still listening after listening to the Eternal Champions episode and being like, I hated it so much. I hate these guys. And throwing your listening device out the window of your car.
Into the Outback.
Highways. Yeah, into the Outback.
Where it was trampled on by a koala.
Koala or kangaroo or some other creature that lives out there.
A drop bear.
I was going to say whether or not they had, they called them interstates or anything out there, but you just had to go full on referencing every single critter that is associated with them. Anyway, and now if we've offended you further, thanks. We appreciate the email and we appreciate the thank you, and hopefully you enjoyed the episode and not and you didn't just stop listening to us forever after that. Anyway, that was our mail. We don't have any notes from the producer that we have acknowledged yet.
Oh no, we did have a small note from the producer on our Facebook page. The producer said that he hoped we picked up some lore at Too Many Games.
Oh, we did. We picked up some Classic Gaming Brothers lore at Too Many Games.
He also angry reacted his own comment.
Oh, well, that's good. Well, he hates lore. Anyway, well, since you had plenty of time in the car, Zach, what did you play coming home from Too Many Games?
Seth, I've been playing RoboCop Rogue City.
Oh, you're playing that in the car?
Absolutely. All 10 plus hours of it. No, I've been playing it since we got back from Too Many Games. I mean, it's been a week or so, but I've been playing it. It's been a fun game. Rogue City was originally released back in 2023, developed by Teyon. I picked it up during the Steam summer sale. I picked up a couple of games. I picked up RoboCop, I picked up Dying Light, and I picked up Paparazzi, so you'll probably hear me mention one of those games in another episode that we're recording in the future because I'll have more games to play. But RoboCop Rogue City is a game based on the RoboCop franchise. It's actually set between the films RoboCop 2 and RoboCop 3, though it does a good job at setting up the story for anyone who may not be familiar with the series. You play as Alex Murphy, aka RoboCop, a part robot, part human police officer who works for the Detroit Police Department. He was created by OCP, Omni Consumer Products, who are a megacorp that primarily control the police force, and they develop tech and other products for everyone. Basically, if you buy something, it's likely made by OCP. And RoboCop was created by them because Alex Murphy was gunned down by a gang in RoboCop 1, and they rebuilt him and made him into a RoboCop. Now, in the game, you are attempting to discover the identity of the new guy, quote unquote, who's a mysterious individual who's popped up in the sales of a narcotic in Detroit called Nuke. I love RoboCop. First of all, I love the movie. It's one of my favorite 80s action flicks, but the game itself just feels like an 80s action flick, which is what I love in a video game. It's a first-person shooter where you play from RoboCop's perspective, which, man, those are just a few words that I love to hear. Another thing I love to hear is that the game has an 80s aesthetic because the movies were made in the 1980s and the 1990s. So they feel like that, and they made the game feel like that. Everyone has big hair. People have shoulder pad suits. There is VHS tapes. There are floppy disks. All the computers are these big, bulky computer like IBMs. It just feels 1980s, despite it being set in the quote-unquote future. Another thing I like is they didn't try to modernize RoboCop as a character. He is still very slow. He is still kind of clunky, but but he can take a beating. So when you get shot, you're not instantly injured that badly, and you can usually take a few hits before you have to try to avoid bullets and go to cover. Your gun also is amazing. So you can pick up weapons that enemies drop, but you always have your service gun, which is a burst fire pistol that has unlimited ammo.
Yeah, it's really good.
And it makes your enemies' heads explode because it's like 80s gore, 80s violence. It's everything you'd expect from RoboCop. You can also pick things up and throw them, such as computer monitors or other people.
Or you can throw people into people.
Oh yeah, which is amazing. RoboCop is a shoot first and then maybe ask questions if he thinks about it kind of guy. Now, another fun thing about the game is between the missions you go on, you get to walk your beat. So RoboCop is a RoboCop. He has a beat and he patrols the city and he does things like ticket illegally parked cars or write citations for people drinking in public. But one of the things I like is you actually have an option when you're talking to people. So like, for example, there was a man I went into like a back alley and there was a guy sitting behind a fence on a couch with a bunch of beer, and he was visibly intoxicated. And RoboCop is like, citizen, public drinking is a crime. And the guy's like, technically, I'm on my couch, so it's not the public. And you have the option of either writing him a ticket or basically saying, I'm going to give you a warning. And if you give him a warning, RoboCop is like, you know what? You make a good point, but don't do this again. And the guy's like, you got it, RoboCop. And when you give people warnings, you gain public trust points. If you give people citations, you uphold the law. But it is a fun game. I like playing it, and I beat the game already. I'm currently going through New Game Plus, which allows you to replay the game with all your perks, which, let me just say, makes the first level a breeze because your perks include like turning your gun from a burst fire to a fully automatic with the extended clip. So you're just like blasting people as you go through the level. Great game, but that's RoboCop Rogue City. Seth, what have you been recently playing?
So recently I've been playing a game that is kind of based on a movie of the past, and that game is American Arcadia, which was developed by Out of the Blue Games and published by Raw Fury and was released back in November 15th of 2023. American Arcadia is a puzzle game that also has a first-person, so it's a 2.5D platformer, but also a first-person game. You play as either Trevor Williams or Angela Selena, and it all takes place in a bubble. And the game is as if the Truman Show was real, but instead of one person's live being recorded, as in the Truman Show, an entire city's of lives was being recorded. And if you weren't popular enough and you lived in the city, you were killed. So it's like the Truman Show, but if the Truman Show was brutal. American Arcadia City, that is being recorded for the television entertainment, is set in the 1970s. However, the rest of the world is in the 2023s. And you play as Trevor Williams, who is this kind of like this office bee. He gets up every day, he waves hello to the neighbor, he goes to his cubicle, he does some mindless worker drone thing, and then goes home and watches TV, and then goes to sleep, like a lot of Americans. However, Trevor, kind of dull to watch. Nobody's really watching him. So eventually, the people who run American Arcadia try to give him a adventure outside and give him tickets to a far-off island resort, which is code for killing him. And they have these tourist people, these guys that come try to get him, to try to escort him out of the location. And Angela, who is the first-person mode game version of the game, she works for the media company that runs the whole entire American Arcadia show, and she tries to help Trevor Williams escape. So you get to control like cameras and stuff, and it's a lot of fun. I really like the game. It's kind of like Inside, but if you had like a third kind of angle to Inside, because it plays with like that forward walking animation type deal, and then it has the first person modes. I'm actually at a level where you have to play as Angela, but you have Trevor and what he's doing on her computer screen in front of her, and you also have to control Trevor. And nice. So you're trying to you have Trevor on the computer screen, and you're trying to walk Trevor forward and avoid guards while somebody's interrogating Angela, and you have to answer his questions correctly. correctly without being distracted by Trevor, and it's kind of a unique gameplay. It's a really cool game. I definitely recommend it. It's pretty much been one of my top playthroughs right now, and I've been really enjoying it. So that's American Arcadia. If you like a puzzle 2.5D game that has been really engaging.
Great. That sounds fun. Well, today we're going to be talking about Too Many Games, the convention that Seth and I went to just a few weeks ago. So you probably heard us mention Too Many Games a few times. We kind of did a lead up to it, and now we're going to tell you that we went and we'll tell you all the things we did. And we're really going to break this down day by day. So we left on Thursday, which was, now this was on Thursday, June 27th, and Seth and I both went to work that day, though I left a little early, and then we met up after, and we started our drive down to Oaks, PA, or specifically King of Prussia, PA. That's where we stayed, and it was a long drive. We listened to a lot of fun music.
Yep.
We did stop for dinner at a place called Mamoon's. Seth, did you like Mamoon's?
Yeah, I love Mamoon's. I'm a big fan of it. It's a falafel restaurant in New Haven, Connecticut, and they also have locations throughout New York as well. But they're a really great place. Whenever I'm in New Haven, Mamoon's is probably one of my top places to go and grab some food. What about you, Zach? Did you like Mamoon's?
I liked Mamoon's. I definitely think it's a kind of a hole in the wall kind of place, despite it being a small chain. So there are multiple Mamoon's. It does still feel like a hole in the wall. And the food is very good. I will say that I would recommend if you go, don't sit near the windows.
Yes.
Maybe sit near the back of the restaurant, just because on a hot day with a lot of plants, those windows get a little buggy.
Yes. I did warn Zach before we go. I did describe Mamoon's as a really good restaurant that's kind of sticky.
That's exactly it.
It lived up to its expectations. It's a really good restaurant, it's just kind of sticky. And sometimes restaurants aren't sticky. Well, they should always be not sticky, but Mamoon's is worth it. But yeah, or take your food away if you're really particular about stuff like that.
Yeah, no, I mean it's good food. It was filling. We had pita chips. They were like fresh out the fryer. The hummus felt like it was made that day. It was like everything felt very fresh when you're eating it, which was nice. And the people there were also very friendly. But yeah, it was overall good food. But then we kept on driving. We got down to King of Prussia. We checked into our hotel a bit late, and we settled in. And then the next morning on the 28th, we woke up bright and early for the daily races, though we missed breakfast at the hotel.
Zach and I came down at the time of 9:35, which you would expect is pretty early, especially for people who were driving all night. 9:35 is a pretty early time. However, breakfast ends promptly at 9:30 on that Friday morning. It was 9:30 was the end time. So Zach and I were treated to no food and no coffee in the let's just say our experience at the Holiday Inn Express was a solid 3-star experience out of 5 stars. And that's a sub 3 stars. This was a 3-star hotel, which I'm scoring 3 stars within that 3-star ranking.
Yes. So we did miss breakfast. We left to go grab some breakfast. We went to a place called Bagelicious. And Bagelicious was really good.
Bagels were delicious.
They were Bagelicious. We got some Bagelicious bagels and some very hot coffee. We both got the same bagel. We got jalapeno bagels with, or no, it was
Asiago bagels with jalapeno cream cheese.
Yeah, Asiago bagels with jalapeno cream cheese, and they were very, very good. Bagelicious is this kind of small little diner type place run by like 2 old ladies, and like there was a teenage girl there who I think was related to them. So yeah, it was good food. But Seth and I needed to kill some time because the convention actually didn't open its doors until 2 p.m. And it was like 9:45, 9:50 by the time we were eating. So we needed something to do. And for those of you who don't know, Oaks, PA, which is where the convention is, and King of Prussia are both very close to Valley Forge. So we're not quite at Too Many Games yet, but Seth, can you tell us where we are?
Valley Forge.
And what are we doing here?
Seeing Washington's headquarters.
Nice. What's your favorite part of Valley Forge so far?
Washington.
That's right, Valley Forge, the location that General Washington and our good patriots camped out during the Revolutionary War. But we decided to go to Valley Forge. We checked out the Washington Memorial Chapel, which had a nice little tiny used bookstore.
And as we went to the Washington Memorial Chapel, it felt like we were walking into BioShock Infinite. There was statues of George Washington with swords right in front of religious iconography.
Oh, like next to the pulpit. Like
right next to the pulpit, there was a statue of George Washington with a sword that looked just like it came out of BioShock Infinite. It had a lot of like different various states, flags. It just felt like America the religion in this chapel. It's definitely a vibe.
Anyway, we left the chapel. We checked out the tiny bookstore. We went to a nice little gift shop / cafe that was behind it. And after that, we went from the chapel to Washington's headquarters. And we toured, first we toured an old train station that was used for tourists and the Boy Scouts when they came for their jamborees. But then we actually went to Washington's headquarters, which is a little house, 3-bedroom, has a living room and like an office area and an attic and a kitchen. And it's a small area, but that's where Washington stayed during this encampment. We also got to walk a bit through the tiny shacks that Washington's personal guard would have been sleeping in. So these were recreations of those original shacks, but still accurate to what they would have stayed in. And from there, we drove over to the National Memorial Arch. We got some really nice pictures. The National Memorial Arch is a big old arch with a bunch of Washington quotes and pictures of Mason iconography and stuff like that. So once we finished our little Americana tour, we went to Uncanny, a comic book store in a mall in King of Prussia, and we stayed there for a couple minutes before we realized what time it was. It was getting to like 1:30-ish, so we decided to go pick up our badges for the convention. We got to Oaks, got our badges, so we waited about I would say it was probably like 1:30, so we maybe waited about 45 to 50 minutes for not only the doors to the convention to open, but also like the stream of people to kind of die down a bit. So we waited a bit for that to end. But once we got in, we were in. And our first stop was visiting Goobertown Hobbies, aka Brent, who we had on our podcast back in episode 105 when he talked about the Total War franchise. For those who don't remember or haven't listened to it, Brent / Goobertown Hobbies is a YouTuber. He does a lot of miniature painting, and he's very into Warhammer and miniatures, but he also very inspired by the Total War franchise and RTSs like Warcraft, which we talked about when we had him on. So it was cool to actually meet Brent in person. We had, of course, met him before, but only through Discord. But this is the first time that we've actually like shared the same space as him. So we got to talk to him, and we shook hands and we chatted a bit, and we chatted for quite some time. But he was starting to get kind of a queue of people who I think wanted to meet him that were his fans, and we didn't want to take up all of his time. So we said our goodbyes to Brent, but we said we'd be back. And then we wandered around the convention hall, checking out different booths. We kind of did a square around the hall, and then we went aisle by aisle through the actual different vendors. And that gave us a really good idea about what everyone had. It also helped us plan for the days ahead.
Yeah, and if anyone's not familiar with the Oaks, PA Convention Center, which we weren't until we arrived, it's split up between, I think it's like 6 different halls, give or take, A, B, C, D.
I think it's 5. So I think there's the 2 main halls that were on the left that were the 2 like panel halls. And one of those halls was split in half with registration. And then there were the 3, the vendor hall, the gaming hall, and then the arcade hall.
Yep. So you picture the first hall that we went through and that we spent a majority of our time was just a gigantic convention hall that was just filled with booths and dealers selling stuff. Too Many Games definitely felt to me like a big buying convention. You could get a lot of whatever you wanted when it came to video game stuff. Very similar to Retro World Expo, but a larger show. And then the second room had all the special guests, and then which we talked about on our pre-Too Many Games pod. And then which also where Brent was, but Brent was in the tabletop section of there was like special guests wall, and then there was like tabletop and like board games type stuff that was more dealers Cars type stuff, which is where Brent was. And then the arcade, which had a wrestling rink for cosplay wrestling, entire big giant hall of arcade games, some of them broken, and then a Harry Houdini escape room trailer, which we opted not to do. And there was bars in various different places, but we didn't. Zach and I didn't drink at the convention. And then there was 2 other halls, as Zach mentioned, that was one for the panel and one that was just showing like larger panels or like a movie. So one of the booths that we saw going through, I think a lot of people had a lot of cool art, a lot of cool different games. One of the booths did have some big box PC games, which I did pick up a couple that I will talk about in our pickups. It was one of the first things, and I think I was the first person to buy something. I think ultimately, based on one purchase of mine, I spent more money, but I think it actually is pretty close to what we spent together. I bought one item that was very expensive, and if you took that away, you would have spent way more than I did. Now, one of the booths had this very expensive item. They had a bunch of high-profile gaming memorabilia. It was run by a guy by the name of Mike, who will probably come on the show at some point in time to talk about high-end collecting. He was a really nice guy. We chatted with him. Like, he had a crew sweater from the Mario movie. He had some really ancient standees and posters from Sonic the Hedgehog.
He had a Mario model from the Toys R Us.
Yeah, it was one of the like an OG Mario plastic giant statue that like a commercial location would have had, like a Toys R Us or something. And then he had a helmet that was from the Journeyman Project 3. I was very interested in the helmet. I thought it was the coolest thing at the show, but it was very expensive. But on Friday, I did not buy it. We ended up we were done with the show. I think it was almost 9:00 or close to it when we were finaling up the show. It was weird because the show opened later than normal shows for us. It was open at like 2. We're usually used to like hitting the floor starting at like 10. We did end up sneaking out of the convention and to get some coffees, and then coming back and going to a panel that was hosted by Brent before 9:00, where he was talking about some techniques involved to getting started painting miniatures. It was a really good panel, and we actually learned that Brent and I had very similar childhoods growing up. We collected both Star Wars collectible card games and played very similar games. After the panel, we wandered around a bit more, and we eventually decided to leave, where we went over to have dinner. We made it to a restaurant called Lock 29 in Montclair and got some dinner and made our way back to the hotel and went to bed.
It is day 2 of Too Many Games, and we're about to head out. Seth, do you have any morning thoughts about Too Many Games?
There's going to be too many games.
How many?
Too many.
Now, on day 2, we got up this time in time for breakfast at the hotel, which was okay. The coffee was not okay. It was very bad. In fact, it was so bad that Seth and I both took our sips, and we said, let's go get better coffee. So we did.
I think we threw the coffee away.
We did. We put it in the trash can.
We said, this coffee is horrible, and then stared at the people who made it and threw it away.
So we decided to go to Duck Donuts to snag some iced coffee, and we'll talk about Duck Donuts a bit when we get into day 3. But it was a nice little donut shop, kind of fancy on the inside, I would say. I felt like I was in like a Five Guys, but the coffee was pretty good. And then we left Duck Donuts. We got to the convention. We got there a bit early before the doors opened, so we got in our little queue, and the doors finally opened, and we got in. Now, on day 2, we decided to kind of make a mental note that we were going to play some of the indie games that were there. So first off, we played a game called Beat the Machine Rebooted by Sanguine Studios. This was a twin-stick shooter where you play as a ship that has to fight computer viruses. It was kind of like Tron meets Smash TV, and it was okay. I think the demo they were showing off had some bugs to it, primarily just because they had modified the demo for Too Many Games, which is something that they did explain to us. They said that they added in an ability to skip certain things so that you could get get right into the game, but this ultimately led to a load issue where sometimes you would skip like instructions and it would take a couple of seconds, maybe 5 to 6 seconds for the game to go from what you skipped to the actual gameplay. Seth, I forget, did you actually get a chance to play Beat the Machine?
I did, yeah. I did play Beat the Machine Rebooted, and I felt the same way, that it was very much like Tron graphics meeting Smash TV.
Now, across from the Beat the Machine Rebooted was a game called Kingdom of the Dump by Roach Games, where we got to speak a bit to the devs. Now, here's what they have to say about Kingdom of the Dump.
We are Roach Games. This is Kingdoms of the Dump. We are real-life janitors making an RPG about trash.
Very cool. What are some of the inspirations behind the game?
So Earthbound was my first RPG, so that's in my bones. Mario RPG, Chrono Trigger, basically your classic Super Nintendo RPGs, but we have brought some new ideas to the mix. So we have incorporated some platforming elements into the game. So a lot of RPGs, you're glued to the floor.
Right, yeah.
If there's a rock in your way, you're stuck, man. You got to walk around it. So we have freeform jumping. You can jump on anything. Every single thing in the game is a platform. NPCs, enemies, everything you can jump on. So that's a big part of the exploration half.
Yeah.
As for the combat, we have a light grid-based combat.
Yeah.
So it's a little more involved than your basic rogue command for like Final Fantasy or something.
Yeah. No, that's very cool.
You can create traps, and all status effects are tied to the tiles that you're on. So you can be standing on burning ground, you got to move off of that, and your space becomes more limited as you go through the battle. And
nice. Now, is this your guys' first game?
This is our first commercial game. I mean, I made a bunch of bad RPG Maker games my whole life.
Same here.
This is our first real commercial project. We did a successful Kickstarter in 2019.
Okay.
And the game's almost done. So
cool.
It's we're up on Steam. If you give us a wish list, it would help us out. It's coming out next year, 2025.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much.
No problem.
It was great to talk to those devs. Seth, you actually got to sit down and play Kingdom of the Dump. What were some of your thoughts?
Yeah, it was an interesting game. I believe the game was made in RPG Maker. I am not 100% sure. I generally don't like games that are made in RPG Maker. It's just like a general rule of thumb. But Kingdom of the Dump was a really unique game in its own right. It had the ability to, I think the developer talked about it in your interview, but you had the ability to like traverse over obstacles and walls, and I thought that was really cool. It felt very much like akin to one of those 90s RPGs, or even like with like crossed with like Paper Mario type of situation. And the characters were fun and cute, and you could play as like a trash can. Really, I think the unique story was really what drew me to it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I liked the aesthetic a lot, and I thought the gameplay was pretty cool. It felt a little different than other RPG Maker games that I've seen. I didn't get to actually get my hands on it, but just from what I watched and what they showed, while Seth was playing the demo, the guy I was talking to showed off a bit of gameplay for a later stage. It does feel a bit more like a Super Mario RPG or Paper Mario versus like Final Fantasy. After that, we walked a bit further over to the Timeworks booth. Timeworks is a game being put together by Starworks Studio. We didn't get a chance to try the demo, but we were impressed by what we saw. The devs were also really excited to share what they've been working on, so here are some of their thoughts.
Yeah, so this is Timeworks. It is a 3D puzzle platforming game, a lot like Portal, but instead of bending space, you bend time. Cool. You work for an Amazon-type corporation that instead of hiring more workers, they invent time travel and force you to work all their shifts. This game is currently out on Steam. We released it back in March, and we just pushed a big update for like quality of life stuff and add achievements and some extra levels for our fans. And yeah, you can currently get this game on Steam. We also have the free demo up on our Steam right now.
Cool. Is this your guys' first game?
Yes, this is our first commercial game. We made a mobile game before this just to be like, okay, we know how to make a game. Yeah. But this is, we're all Drexel students. Okay. We don't do this for class. We just do this outside of class because we're serious about making games.
Very cool.
But yeah, this is our first game. We're currently working on a prototype for our next game. But this is still like, this is our baby. We like taking this out to conventions and showing it to people.
Yeah, it looks great.
Yeah, thank you. Thank
Cool.
you.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, no, thank you. Do you have our card here?
Well, I don't, but I'll give you a card. Great. Yeah, no, it was very cool to see the game, and I think there is a demo available on Steam, so maybe I'll download it and give it a shot someday.
And I think it's available.
Yeah, I think that is, you can just buy it, yeah.
Yeah, it is available. I've been looking at it as something that I'm thinking about picking up. It is definitely on my wish list. But yeah, it looks like a pretty cool game. So after that, we went over and tried the game Little Nemo and the Nightmare Fiends demo being developed by Team Nemo. I played on an arcade cabinet, and Zach played on a computer, and we got a chance to talk to the dev, so here's what they told us.
Yeah, so this is Little Nemo and the Nightmare Fiends. It is our group, we call ourselves Team Nemo. We bunch of different industry veterans coming together to make this game. Basically, it's based off of the Little Nemo Adventures in Slumberland comic strips from the 1905s, like kind of early 1900s. Yeah. Basically, Winsor McKay, the original artist of those comics, pioneered this whole animated art style before animation was as we know it. He did a lot of stuff that would later inspire Walt Disney. So we're taking those original comic strips, the beautiful artwork from those, redoing it, adding new features, and just bringing it to life in the most creative ways that we can find, in a Metroidvania style platform.
Yeah, very cool. And I do like a hand-drawn art style and stuff like that to match the comic.
We have our own little animation cell.
I was looking at those. Those are cool. Now, is this your guys' first game?
So we have a team of industry veterans. This is the first time as a team that we've come together for this project.
Very cool.
But we've had people that have worked on so many things. We have a employee from Namco. We have some video game professors. I released a game on Steam myself. I would say I'm probably the youngest one on the team, but yeah, we got tons of different people from all over.
Yeah, I definitely had like Pajama Sam's vibes.
Yeah, I got that.
Combined with Prince of Persia or like Harold and the Purple Crayon.
Yeah, that's the kind of aesthetic. The gameplay felt more like, more like Z2 than like the NES Little Nemo, which is more of like a Capcom platformer. So it was definitely cool to try out.
Zach played the game Slime 64, and the game is being developed by Wave Paradigm and is a 3D collectathon game in the same vein as Banjo-Kazooie, though with some of the gameplay cues taken from Glover. You play as different slimes such as water, earth, fire, or air slimes that have different abilities to get through the level. Like earth slime can pass over grates by turning into a boulder and spinning, or air slime can do some gliding. It definitely looked like a fun little platforming collectathon type game that I didn't get a chance to play.
Yeah, well, this is kind of a busy booth. I enjoyed it. I thought it was kind of fun. It definitely felt more like a Glover than a Banjo-Kazooie game, but a lot of the same heart is from like Banjo-Kazooie.
Lastly, we tried out Below the Stone, which is being developed by Stroll Art and published by Apogee Entertainment. We saw this game at PAX East. When we walked through the Apogee booth, it was there. This time we were able to speak with the team behind it, and here they go.
I'm Mike Strollart. I'm director and artist on Below the Stone, a game about dwarves. It's a roguelike extraction game. Mining is heavily involved, procedurally generated caves. We've been working on it for 4 years, so it's been a wild ride getting here.
Yeah. Is this your guys' first game?
This is our first commercial title. Yeah. Okay. So we just hit early access. Which means finally the game is out there. Right. It's actually on sale right now for 20% off during the summer sale. Yeah.
Very cool. And I see it's published by Apogee, which is a pretty prominent name in the retro game industry. Yep. So how did that come about?
It was funny. Apogee was talking about relaunching, and they reached out to a few developers. We were one of them. Yeah. And I actually didn't believe it was the Scott Miller that was actually from Apogee a while back. Yeah. He messaged me like on Facebook and Twitter, and like my first reaction, which you shouldn't do, my first reaction was I just started blocking every publisher that was reaching out to us because I was like, I hate publishers. And then he ended up messaging me on like Twitter and Facebook, and he found he found my like personal socials. I'm like, all right, I'll talk with this guy and see what's going on. And then he was seriously coming down with a deal for Below the Stone, and we ended up working something out.
Well, that's cool. Yeah. Hey, very awesome. Well, thank you very much. It's cool to see the game.
Oh, appreciate you stopping by and checking it out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think Below the Stone definitely felt like the cave bits of Stardew Valley to me.
Yeah, with like it has like a crafting aesthetic to it.
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
After we played some games and interviewed some people, we went over to the arcade section of the convention that I mentioned earlier, and we played some arcade games. Zach played a little bit of Versus Super Mario Bros., which is the arcade version, the NES game, and Seth played Excite Bike. They were fun. I enjoy Excite Bike. I think it's a great game. I did not win, though. I got 5th or 6th. We also played some Mortal Kombat, and that's when Zach learned that I'm still a cheater when it comes to button combinations, and I beat Zach multiple times. I think Zach beat me once or twice. And then we went over and we looked at the Dungeons & Dragons Mysteria game, realized it was frozen, we shed a tear, and we moved on. Then we went over to the console free play, and we played a little bit of Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine and some Golden Axe, because that's kind of what we do. We played that on a Sega Genesis Mini, and they had an interesting console free play area. They had different consoles that were like entire areas dedicated to that one console. So there was the Genesis, NES, SNES, PlayStation, and they had like actual systems hooked up, and also the mini classics. So it's kind of a cool way to play these games. You know, go play some PlayStation games if you're really into PlayStation, N64, Sega Genesis, what have you. There was a console free play for everybody. After that, we went over and we went to Brent's second panel for the convention. We did go and attend all of Brent's panels to make sure that we showed we were friends, hoping that maybe he'll come back onto our show.
Brett's panel on Saturday was really fun. It had 2 other panelists who are guests of the con. One was one of the creators of the game Slapshot Showdown, which is a Blood Bowl-esque miniature game with like universal monsters as hockey players. And the other game was called Snapships, which was like a starfighter miniature game. And they talked about their games, but they also talked about just the concept of alternative wargaming. You know, things that are separate from games like Warhammer, and games that people might be more interested in getting into if they find Warhammer to be too daunting. Like me, I find Warhammer to be too daunting.
I find Warhammer too daunting.
Seth and I were getting hungry, so we hadn't eaten lunch. We only had the terrible breakfast and our coffees, and we decided that we were going to go to a couple more booths, and then we were going to call it a day. So we went to a few more booths that were just in the dealer's room that we didn't really get a closer look at, and then we left, and we made our way over to Philadelphia proper, and we stopped at a place called D'Alessandro's, which is a cheesesteak place. Now, it's not one of the 2 famous cheesesteak places that are in Philly, but D'Alessandro's is well known enough to have its own Wikipedia page. So here we are. We left Too Many Games for some dinner or lunch, late lunch, early dinner. Early dinner.
Yeah, early dinner.
Yeah. Where are we, Seth?
I don't know. Cheesesteak place.
It's D'Alessandro's in Philadelphia. And we are waiting on our food. And we'll do a review. We'll do a food review. Sound good? Sure. You sound ecstatic.
I am.
You are. What did we see today, Seth?
Too many games.
How many?
Too many.
And D'Alessandro's was great, and we had some cheesesteaks and beer, and we sat in the kind of hot, muggy weather of Philadelphia and ate our cheesesteaks and beer. I dropped some of my cheesesteak on my pants, and they got ruined, and I was very sad. So we just finished our Philly cheesesteaks. Seth, what's your review?
It's pretty good.
What did you like about it?
The Wiz.
The Wiz?
Yeah, the Wiz.
What about the Waz?
No.
Okay. How's your beer?
It was good.
Good?
How's your beer?
It's beer.
How'd you like it?
I liked it a lot.
The Philly Sushi?
Yeah. It's one of the better. It's a good Philly cheesesteak. Yeah. A little messy, but I think that's the point. And then we went back to our hotel. It was like, I want to say it was like 7:40, 7:45 when we got back, and I was pooped. Like I got into like the bed and I was just ready to go to bed, and we just kind of like chilled out for the rest of the night. I think we talked about going out again or going back to the convention even, and we were like, no, we're just going to call it a night, and we did. And we got to bed a little early. We also knew we had a bit of a long drive back on Sunday, and getting a lot of sleep was important.
So finally on day 3, we went and checked out of the hotel that hopefully we will never stay in again. And we packed up the car and we thought about Duck Donuts, and we just didn't even bother trying to get the breakfast in the hotel and just went straight over to Duck Donuts again to snack some breakfast and coffee.
It is too many games. Day 3. Where do we go, Seth?
Too many games.
No, where did we just go?
Oh, Duck Donuts.
Are we going to eat some donuts?
That's right, we are.
How's your coffee?
It's pretty good.
Nice. What are you most excited about today for the 3rd day of Too Many Games?
Going home.
The donuts were fresh. They were warm and sticky. I think they were overall pretty good. I would prefer my frosting to be a little cooled down before getting and eating them.
Yeah.
So I feel like they were a little too wet, but they were good. They would be better.
You don't love a wet donut.
I would say on the scale of breakfasts, Bagelicious, clear winner. I would say Duck Donuts, a little bit better than the hotel breakfast. The Duck Donuts coffee, though, clear winner. We did have a plan, though, on the day 3 when we went to the convention. Since it was Sunday, I was watching the Journeyman the helmet throughout the entire time, and I didn't think I was going to be able to leave Pennsylvania without that helmet. So we ended up negotiating, Mike and I purchased the Journeyman helmet.
So for the record, Seth, what did you just get?
Journeyman helmet from Legacy of Time.
Are you excited?
I am.
I'm proud of you.
Thanks.
With there, we went over to the paint and take area that Brent was running for the entire convention, and we painted up some miniatures, and we hung out with Brent.
So we're at paint and take now. Seth, how goes your paint?
Good.
What are you painting?
A thing.
A thing?
Yeah.
You want to go in more detail?
No.
Okay.
Zach and I both painted a Reaver from the Marvel Zombies game, so it was a zombie that was part of a tank, which was great. And we also then met up with Josh from the Still Loading podcast, who came on our show to talk about James Bond back on our penultimate 200th episode 199. So we talked with him and then hung out with him and just walked around with him, as this was the first time that we were really, Zach met him in person very briefly in Connecticut, and then so this was really a time where we could just kind of hang out with him. And at one point in time, I went off to go take a picture of something that wasn't there because somebody had purchased it, and I told Zach and Josh, don't worry, go on, I will find you, I'm going to take a picture of something. And then they were gone, and I never found them ever again. And Zach didn't respond to my messages, and I ended up just hanging out by myself and eventually going to Brent's booth a little early.
Yeah, well, so Josh and I went on a little adventure. Josh said to me that he wanted to go meet Pat Contry, Pat the NES punk. So we got to Pat's booth. We talked to Pat Contry a little bit. Josh bought something from Pat's booth, and we then walked over to the Limited Run booth, and Josh was looking at some stuff over there. Josh then said he wanted to introduce me to Rewind Arcade. So Rewind Arcade is a couple who run an import booth, but they also run a YouTube channel that does short form documentaries on various games and topics. So I got to talk a bit with Rewind Arcade. We exchanged our information, so hopefully maybe we'll have them on the show someday. I've seen them before. They go to Retro World Expo, so it's not like we'll never see them again sort of deal. They frequent the convention scene, but it was cool to meet them. But then I finally met up with Seth after I noticed that he had messaged me a million times and called me, and I went over to meet him over at Brent's final panel, which was really fun. So his panel featured 3 newbie painters and challenged them to finish a paint job in 45 minutes. And it was great. So these were 3 painters who, per their own words, had never really painted before. One of them said they had done it once, but 2 of them said it was their very first time painting a figurine. And Brent, did his Brent thing. One thing I really like about Brent is where some people could use this panel as kind of a way to kind of tease these people for being newbies. Brent kind of put his own perspective on it. So when someone did something that was a little little odd, maybe an odd choice for a person to do. Brent was honest about it, but he also said, some people just do things differently and stuff like that. So Brent has a positive outlook on things, so it was kind of fun to see how he handled that panel.
Brent is probably one of the nicest humans around. He's a kind soul, the Bob Ross of miniature painting. So if you are just interested in hearing somebody who's got a nice soothing voice, let alone be interested in painting minis, check out either Goobertown Hobbies on YouTube or Paint Bravely, the podcast on Spotify and all sorts of podcasting apps. Paint Bravely, the podcast, is also on YouTube. And Brent's podcast and his YouTube, very successful, more successful than Classic Gaming Brothers podcast, but they do a really good show.
Yeah, they really do. And from there, we helped Brent tidy up his panel, and we bid him adieu. And then we met up with Josh one more time. We said goodbye to him, and we got on our way. And we left Too Many Games.
So that was Too Many Games, day 3, final day. Seth, thoughts?
There was too many games.
What was your favorite part of today?
Buying my time machine.
You liked buying your time machine?
I did.
Nice. What's your favorite part of this weekend?
Hanging out with our friends.
Yeah, that was good. Are you ready to go home?
I am.
And that was that. We basically just drove all the way back home. We did talk about potentially meeting up with Barry. Unfortunately, it just didn't work out. So Barry, if you're listening, sorry. And maybe next time we will plan better so that we can actually meet up with you. But we drove all the way back to good old Rhode Island, stopping once along the way to get some potentially life-threatening Panera.
We went to the Darien truck stop to get some food because we were starving, and we only had snackies, and we wanted something a little bit more tangible or less substantial. And we went to this Panera Bread that was in the Darien truck stop, and there was a slight drip that was going on, and Zach and I got relatively sick, and we believe we're going to blame 100% on Panera.
Yeah.
Not on the truckload of Cheese Whiz that we had the previous night before.
Definitely not. We did finally get back to Rhode Island. We parted ways, and from there, I made my way back to Boston. I got in at like 11:40 p.m., so it was a long day, but we had a good time. Now, that was Too Many Games. We had a great time, but let's talk about some of our pickups. So I'll go first. I had a majority of the pickups. So I picked up a few things. I got a 400-in-1 Famiclone handheld. It's nothing really special. It's one that I've seen before when just going to like flea markets or the mall, but it was for a pretty good price. Usually when I see them for sale, they're always heavily upcharged. So like, for example, there's a local flea market I go to, and there's a booth there that usually has this exact handheld for sale, selling for $45 to $50, which is a ridiculous price for what it is. It is a bootleg Famiclone handheld. I paid, I think it was $10 for it, which I thought was more than fair for what it was. I also picked up a 5-in-1 SNES multi-cart, which was really cool to find. SNES multi-carts are not super common. They're not incredibly rare or expensive, but you just don't see them that often. This one had Super Mario World, Top Gear, Desert Strike, FIFA 96, and Tom and Jerry on it, though Tom and Jerry is spelled Tom and Jerem. I also found in the same booth a Pico interactive reprint of Super 3D Noah's Ark, which was going for pretty cheap. It was the cart with the manual and what looks like a reprinted box cover. It was like $30, so I grabbed it. It's kind of funny that I did, though, because the next day I found the original release of Super 3D Noah's Ark, the original Wisdom Tree cartridge that has the special cartridge slot on top so you could plug in a authentic SNES game so you can bypass the lockout chip. So now I own both. I own the reprint from Pico and the original from Wisdom Tree, but I'm kind of happy I own both. I don't actually own an original Super Nintendo. I have a SNES clone that goes through HDMI, and the original version of Super Noah's Ark 3D does not work. The SNES clone, just the way that the SNES clone works, it can't read the cartridge. The cartridge is designed to be played on an original Super Nintendo, and specifically with an authentic cartridge plugged into the top, so it bypasses the lockout chip. The reprint, however, works perfectly. perfectly. So I at least can play Super 3D Noah's Ark on hardware. I just can't play the very original release of it at the moment. Maybe someday I'll trade in my SNES clone for an authentic Super Nintendo. Not today. I also found a copy of Warcraft 2 Dark Saga for the PS1. Warcraft 2 Dark Saga is the PS1 port of Warcraft 2 Tides of Darkness and Beyond the Dark Portal. I, of course, already have Warcraft 2 Tides of Darkness and Beyond the Dark Portal for the PC. I don't necessarily need the PS1 version, but I've always kind of wanted it, and actually since I was really little. Back when Seth and I were young, we lived near a GameStop that we would walk to sometimes, either after school or just on the weekends. And at this GameStop, they used to have a bunch of PlayStation 1 games in a bargain bin, and one of those games was Warcraft 2 The Dark Saga, which I remember really wanting to grab, but at the time I was a child with no money, and I don't think I pointed it out to Seth because I think I assumed that he would not buy it for me. So I never picked it up, and one of the next times I went to that GameStop, it was gone. So I kind of always wanted to grab a copy, and because it's kind of an obscure game, it ranges in price, but I found it for a pretty good deal, and I was able to kind of talk the guy down a bit because it's missing the original manual, but I grabbed it. And I also picked up some stuff for my partner. I got them some earrings, and I also picked up a keychain. But beyond that, that's what I grabbed from Too Many Games. Seth, you want to talk about the things you got?
Sure, yeah. As I mentioned earlier, I picked up a couple of video games, including a sealed box of Journeyman Project Buried in Time, which is the second game in the Journeyman trilogy, and a sealed box of Alien Legacy. I got Journeyman because it's Journeyman, and if you've listened to this show for any extensive period of time, you understand that both Zach and I really love Journeyman. I bought Alien Legacy because I'm pretty sure there's just a core memory of it in my mind. I don't know if we owned it or if I just saw it and really wanted to own it, but when I saw it at the show, I pulled it out and I looked at it and I said, wow, there's something about this game that speaks to me. It may have just been my memories misfiring, and like memories logging themselves into long-term instead of short-term memory, me having manufactured memories about my love for this game. But I did it, so now I have a sealed copy of Alien Legacy. We got both of those games for a relatively good deal. And then the other purchase I got was the Journeyman helmet. It was sold to me as a screen-worn Journeyman helmet from the FMVs within Legacy of Time. I had no reason to doubt that. And the seller, Mike, who was a very nice guy, had some proof that it was what it was, including some emails from the original prop designer. When I got it home, I did some additional research, and I found the original screen-worn Journeyman suit, the entire suit. It is at the University of Southern California's library, and it's sealed within a glass box, and people have seen it recently. So clearly the helmet that I have it's not the one that was used. It was something else. And so I was curious because it's decidedly the helmet from the game. There's no question about that. And the game was made in 1998. Also, it was a popular game, but I wouldn't say popular enough to cosplay. So I was curious of why this helmet existed. So I actually ended up reaching out to the former CEO of Presto Studios, who I think we mentioned in our Journeyman Redux episode and our original Journeyman episode, Michel. I reached out to him, who's no longer in video games at all, and he hasn't been in video games for quite some time. And I just sent him an email and said, hey, I have this item that I purchased. What is it? Did you guys have extra helmets on the set, and so on and so forth? And I got a response pretty quick, mostly because I think he was very confused at what I had. It was a very quick response. He mentioned that he gets a lot of inquiries, but this was the strangest. And so we exchanged a couple of emails, and he did some research for me, and I sent him photographs of the item. He validated the item. It was not an extra screen-worn prop. What he believes, and he's the CEO of the company who was running the project ultimately, he believes that it was a early prototype of the Journeyman 3 biosuit helmet from the Chameleon armor. He mentioned that it is missing some parts, and he believes, from his memories, that Don Pennington, the prop master, created this piece, the helmet, first as a proof of concept before building out the entire suit. And he believes that there's actually some layers of blue paint underneath the green paint, because he believes that it was painted blue originally and then had to be repainted green because the blue screen wouldn't have worked if the item was blue. And Phil Saunders, who designed the helmet, would go on to design the Iron Man suit. Like for the movies, he would go on to be the lead artist for the Iron Man suits. So what I have is a prototype helmet designed by Phil Saunders and created by Don Pennington, who are both exceptional people in both of their industries. Don Pennington is retired now, but he was one of the top prop masters at the time. And Phil Saunders is gone on to do a lot of work in the film production studio since working at Prestos. And it also got me connected to Michelle, who was the CEO of Presto and who has tentatively agreed to come on our show. So we may actually have a show in the future with Michelle. So, and possibly maybe even Phil Saunders, if I can send him an equally confusing email that it gets too tempting to open. Anyway, it's in a sealed case right now. I need to put it into a sealed case that fits in the style of my room, but ultimately I'm pretty happy with my purchase, and I'm looking forward to, once it's not so hot, kind of redesigning some of my office around the helmet. I also did buy some jewelry from a vendor called Cork and Charm, and there was an artist by the name of Sarah there that had some cool items that I purchased as well from her. So very cool stuff at Too Many Games. But yeah, so I think ultimately the show was a lot of fun. I'm glad that we went personally. I think we had a lot of fun. I don't know if I would go again, but maybe for a shorter time, maybe if we figured out a faster way to get there. I definitely feel like it was worth it for that time, but I don't know.
The one thing we really got to thank our producer, Doug, for allowing us to go on this trip. And we joke about him, quote unquote, allowing us, but in reality, he provided us with ways of getting the money for this.
Yes. So producer Doug's father-in-law found in his attic some old computers, specifically 2 Commodores. He didn't want them anymore. He was going to throw them away into the trash. And producer Doug, in all of his wisdom, saw those and said, I think I know a couple of guys who might like these. And he sent them to us, and we said, we do like those, but they are valuable. So if you give them to us, we will probably sell them. And he said, yes, they are for you to have. And so producer Doug ended up giving them to us, and we did sell them for the price of the Too Many Games convention and also our hotel room at the Holiday Inn Express. We really subsidized this entire trip to Too Many Games based on producer Doug's on his kindness and his thoughtfulness for us and our show. For all the connections that we got, including being able to have a communication back and forth between the CEO of Presto Studios. Thank you, producer Doug. And I know that you listen because you're our producer, so thank you.
And with that, that's our Too Many Games post-pod. See, it's just not as good as PAX with the post-PAX pod, but this is our post-Too Many Games pod, and we hope you enjoyed listening to it. But we're going to get into our retro rewind. So, Seth had me play X-Men vs. Street Fighter. Originally released back in 1996 as a coin-op game, I played the 1997 PS1 version. It's a fun game. It's a fast-paced Capcom fighter where you play as X-Men characters or as Street Fighter characters and you fight each other. I would say, though, it is arguably the weakest of the Marvel vs. Capcom games, and it's solely just due to the fact that it has the least amount of characters. The thing about Marvel vs. Capcom to me is that it's kind of like Super Smash Brothers of the Street Fighters universe. It is like effectively the same style of gameplay as Street Fighters, right? You have this like fast-paced, combo-based action game, but it has a buttload of silly characters in it. You have like in one of the more recent games, you have like the guy from Dead Rising and he like hits you with a shopping cart. You know, it's just a bunch of silly things packed into this big game with these characters who have no reason to be together. Ryu and Cyclops don't need to be in the same game together, but they are. And I think it's fun, but X-Men vs. Street Fighter is just arguably the weakest because it's the least amount of characters. It's only X-Men and it's only Street Fighter characters. It's still a very fun game. It's very fast paced. The combos are hilarious. The like special moves you do are great. There's this one if you're playing a Cyclops where he like touches his visor and it just opens up this massive screen clearing optic blast.
I like that.
Fantastic. All of the voices for the X-Men characters are all from the original show, so that's fun. You can if you recognize them, that's because they're from the show. Ultimately, it's a great game. It's just not the same as later Marvel vs. Capcom games. as I say in my notes, once you have a game where Mega Man can get body slammed by Captain America, you know you have a masterpiece on your hands. So does X-Men vs. Street Fighter hold up? Yes, it holds up, but play the later games because they hold up a little better in my opinion. Seth, next week you can play Street Fighter 2010 for the NES.
Great. I'm looking forward to it. Zach had me play Bram Stoker's Dracula. The game was released back in 1993 and was developed by Psygnosis for the Genesis and published by Psygnosis. It was also released on various other consoles and such as the Game Boy, the Amiga, and DOS. I think DOS came out in 95. The Game Boy version was a different game. It was an 8-bit version. The ones that was on the SNES and the DOS was 16-bit. And that's the one I played, was the Sega Genesis one. The game is a side-scrolling platform, and you play as Jonathan Harker, and you have to make your way through the levels, apparently aided by Abraham Van Helsing, who apparently gives you weapons. Let me tell you about my time playing the game. You start off at this weird mansion/castle, and you have to fight enemies, namely rats and bats, and they come at you at really bad angles that are not within your swing pattern, so you have to like do this weird crouch whenever you have to strike a rat, and it's very annoying because your swing goes downwards at an angle naturally, but just not downwards enough at an angle to hit a rat, and definitely not anywhere close to where it hits a bat. It's annoying as heck. And then I got to the end of the first level where apparently Van Helsing was, but I didn't think that he was Van Helsing. I thought he was a large sea captain, and I don't know what he was doing in the game. And then he started yelling at me about axes. I think he was trying to give me an axe, but I didn't take the axe because I was afraid of the sailor Axeman, and I just left the level, ultimately depriving me of an axe weapon, which could have helped. I went on to fight the boss, which was like some cowled creature with chains, and when it died, I ended up back in the castle mansion thing in the next chapter. I was so confused at what was going on, why my character was going back and forth in this thing. I'm sure it probably didn't help that I skipped through the cutscenes, but it's a dull, confusing side-scroller, and you could probably pass on it. Doesn't really hold up. Next week, Zach, since I had the pleasure of playing the game Bram Stoker's Dracula for the Genesis, why don't you play Bram Stoker's Dracula for the Game Boy?
Cool, I will. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for this episode, this post Too Many Games pod, and I want to thank Doug, I want to thank Brent, and I want to thank Josh and everyone else that we got to meet at Too Many Games, and I want to thank you for listening. If you want to reach out to us, you can email us at classicgamingbrothers@gmail.com. You can also find us on our Facebook, Classic Gaming Brothers, our Instagram, Classic Gaming Brothers, our X, CG Brothers Pod, or our Blue Sky, CG Brothers Pod. We're also available on Threads as Classic Gaming Brothers. You can also subscribe to us on YouTube as Classic Gaming Brothers. We're also available wherever podcasts can be listened to, such as Podbean or iTunes or iHeartRadio. And with that, am I forgetting anything, Seth?
Don't play games like my brother.
And don't play games like my brother.
I've been Seth.
And I've been Zach.
And we've been the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's
right.
That's right.